It's that time of the week on ESPN's Football Forecast where Arsenal fans can grimace for about 8 to 10 minutes, maybe a little bit longer if you're lucky. Arsenal playing Brighton, and this is one of those ones where you look at the fixtures, and about maybe sort of 3 or 4 weeks ago, you're thinking about this sort of run-in. This was one that was circled where you would think, this is going to be a really, really tricky one for Arsenal, and why Arsenal's run-in has been much harder. That said, the last couple of games, Newcastle and Chelsea, they were banana skins that they've been able to navigate. But they come up against a Brighton side that have been so exciting to watch this year, Glenn. What have you loved the most about Brighton this year?
Well, I think first and foremost the way that Roberto De Zerbi come in and he picked a squad up. Quite often when you get a new manager in any league, should we say, he's been sacked, and there's a little bit of happiness around the place that it's sort of the dawn has risen and there's a new start, and you've got everyone on board, like even lads who have been frozen out under the old regime. They feel as though the chance, so there's an uplift in training and everything, whereas this was a very different appointment. Roberto went into a group of players that were really disappointed that Graham had left, so he had to pick them up almost and say, this is the way we want to play, this is what we want to do. And I think for him to do that in that manner so quickly and sort of to be doing it out there in the Premier League week in, week out, that style of play that we've become used to now for Brighton, I think he's done an exceptional job. But what I enjoy most is just their directness, and I don't mean long ball directness, I mean the way they entice people onto them and then just pop through the lines and get right in on goal. I honestly do think that they're one of the best teams to watch in the Premier League.
I totally agree. I think a part of me is almost surprised that they're not higher up. That might sort of surprise people, but I'm not totally sure why they're not. Because in terms of sort of dominating games of football and having a way to cut through, having talent there as well, maybe it's just a lack of being able to be clinical. I mean, that might be the obvious thing to say here, but I just think they've been wonderful. And in terms of sort of tactics move so quickly now, but it's also kind of can be cyclical at times. But Brighton have just got everyone else excited. Liverpool sort of taking little elements. Pep Guardiola's said the same thing in terms of Man City and how they've made those changes as well. So coming into this game against Arsenal, earlier in the season, it was around the Christmas period. It was a 4-2 victory for Arsenal. This will be very, very different, won't it? Because as you said, De Zerbi sort of came in, picked them up, and the results weren't great to start with. But this is a Brighton team that they know who they are, and it's going to be very difficult for Arsenal, isn't it?
It is, but equally, Brighton just lost 5-1 to Everton. Like that.
But they just won 6-0 against Wolves.
That's probably Brighton in a nutshell. Yeah. In a way, as to why they are where they are in the table, is because they'll have an outstanding game against Wolves and Manchester United, who they completely outplayed. 1-0 was lucky for United. They should have been 2 or 3. But then equally, they've gone and lost at home to Everton 5-1. And they take on an Arsenal side that I think actually put in their best performance of the season against Newcastle. They would have gone to Newcastle, and St James's was absolutely bouncing. They destroyed Tottenham there. They destroyed United there. Arsenal are going there thinking, this is the one where it all goes all over the place. And we said a couple of weeks ago, if they lose that one, we'll start calling it a bottle job. And they didn't. They went there and I think if they somehow go on and win the title, we'll talk about that game as the one that showed why they're champions, because they were resilient, they were physical, they stuck in the game, they created loads of chances. And I think if they're looking at Brighton now, they're going, it's a completely different sort of game, less pressure, total football. That suits Arsenal, no?
I don't know, because I think Arsenal playing at home, I think that makes this harder for me, because Brighton will get on the ball and they will probably dominate possession, I would imagine. It could be tight. It's going to be very interesting in terms of Arsenal's press and how they sort of get the ball back from them. But if Brighton have a good start to this game, that crowd, that's going to get tricky for Arsenal. Whereas away from home, it was one of those where the sort of backs to the wall element probably played a part. Also, Newcastle aren't as expressive as Brighton. Brighton could really quieten this crowd. I think they could make this really tense for them.
So I think from a Brighton point of view, you mentioned Everton. And Everton came to the Amex and they sat in and they frustrated. There was no space between the lines. Yeah. And I think when you look at the stats and everything, I think Everton had 5 shots on target, scored everyone. And sometimes you just have afternoons like that. But when you look at Brighton's play, Pickford played really well in the afternoon. They hit the bar post 3 times. So you're thinking, oh, well, it might just be one of those games where it didn't quite go for them. But then I look at the Arsenal game and I think Arsenal have got to come out and play. And that's exactly what Brighton loves. So they'll get their centre-backs on the ball, they'll wait for that press to come, and they'll try and play through the third. So I think from a Brighton point of view, it will suit them. And then I think from an Arsenal point of view, it's I think a lot of it'll depend on what happens on Saturday in the Manchester Leeds game, Manchester City Leeds. I think, do you know, we always talk about Arsenal and bottling it, for want of a better word. But if if Leeds do get a result against City, that pressure will be massively on Arsenal. And I think, like you say, that Emirates crowd can be a huge positive, but it can also be a huge negative.
Wouldn't you say, though, this season that crowd has actually, for the most part, been very positive?
Yeah,
they had a few nervy moments, definitely the one against Southampton, but the crowd actually helped them get over the line. They're trying to build like the atmosphere that you get maybe at Anfield or at St James's. And if City do lose, my feeling is they'll actually go, we're back alive again, because I think they're dead at the moment.
Yeah.
I think they're going, we beat Newcastle, well done. Like I think we said before, when they beat Chelsea, it was like the most pointless London derby win it must have felt like. Leeds go and beat City, they're going 1-0, hold on a minute, they've got to go play Madrid again, pressure's on them again, we just got to get our job done against Brighton.
Yeah, I just think that...
You say it against Brighton, like...
Yeah, that's the thing for me. That's the thing. I think you're forgetting that.
It came out that way.
Okay.
I love Brighton. I think they are the most exciting team to watch.
Yeah.
But I think there's certain areas of the pitch, say, where you have Ben White against Kara Matoma. Matoma tends to struggle against fullbacks who don't want to get forward very often. White tends to be pretty conservative if he's against a winger who plays in that way. So that battle will be interesting. If you keep Matoma quiet, that's a really big part of Brighton being direct. And then on the opposite side, I think you have Martinelli, who's against Pascal Gross. Martinelli's got to fancy himself in this.
Surely, yeah.
I fancied Rashford against him, but...
Rashford played against Caicedo, that's why.
Oh, I meant in the semi-final. But yeah, I mean, they have got a little bit of a problem at right back. But he'll suss it out, like you said. Caicedo drops in there. I think that it's going to be a very tough one to call, that one. I think.
I do. I think with Southampton and Newcastle, and even like you say the Everton result. If you ever look at the average position of that Everton game, it's like they curled up into a ball. Everton and Brighton have got everyone sort of bombing on. So in terms of the ebb and flow of a football match, the same for Arsenal against Southampton, dominating the ball. We're always going to dominate the ball. Newcastle to a point as well. But Brighton, this is the thing, Pascal Gross, as much as if Martinelli gets one-on-one with him, he should be able to burn him. They've got to have the ball first. I think this Brighton side could have more possession, and that will just create a completely different environment for me if you can't get yourselves on the ball. This game, I could massively see this being 0-0 at half-time. And then what happens is you then zone into literal sections of a football match, and it's so intense. I think it's going to be a cracking game to watch, because Brighton both, even if they go 1-0 down, you could see them going 1-0 down and being fine and keep playing and create, but you could also see them going 1-0 up and then frustrating and aggravating this Arsenal team massively. And can they cope with that in the second half of the game? This is going to be a really, really tough game for Arsenal.
The only reason I think this actually suits Arsenal is because when Brighton go 1-0 up, they don't actually sit in. They'll carry on playing their football. And also,
give yourself a chance,
they're not, at the moment, overly street smart. When Newcastle go 1-0 up, they waste a lot of time. They take times on throw-ins. They go down. Brighton want to play football, which is lovely to see. And also it makes for a very entertaining game, which is why every time you sit and watch Brighton, you don't see many stoppages. The game's fast-flowing. That suits Arsenal. It suits players like Ødegaard who want to get on the ball. Obviously, I criticised him a few weeks ago for saying he's hiding.
Yeah, and he's been strong since, hasn't he?
Yeah, he obviously watches Football Forecast. If you don't watch it, start watching it now. But I think he's just been in outstanding form. 5 goals in his last 5 games. And I think he's the player where... The one area where I wonder if Brighton can deal with it is with Saka, you'll have your fullback 1v1, and Stupinian does pretty well in those battles. Martinelli against Pascal Gross, whoever plays right back. If Caicedo plays right back, Ødegaard's probably licking his lips because he'll have a little bit more freedom in the middle of the park. He's the guy that Arsenal need. Yeah. And if Arsenal score early, we're all talking about Brighton scoring early. Arsenal fans are sitting there going, well, the Emirates has been a bit of a cauldron at times this season. They get 1, they could get 2 in the first 20.
Again, when I think about that great start, and they could start really well, it was against Chelsea, who again was so fearful in that game. And I think that's why it was... Chelsea, again, in name, you go, that's a scary game. But in reality, it kind of wasn't like that. And I just feel like Brighton's the other way around. One final question I wanted to ask you. We've just done a video talking about young Premier League talents. I think got 3 Brighton players in that one of which is Evan Ferguson. Does Evan Ferguson come back into the starting lineup? He played half a game in the last one. Do you think he should get involved in this one?
I hope so. Yeah, I'm sure if he's fit. Listen, I think one thing about Brighton is their squad's quite small. I think they're starting to look a little bit jaded. I must say that they've played a lot of football, all of them. But I think him coming back into the fold, Evan Ferguson come back in the fold, I think it just gives them that platform, that physicality up front, and just a little bit of breathing space to be able to go right through the lines, go right into it if needed. And he's always got an eye for a goal. But this is the fixture of the weekend that I find so difficult to predict.
Yeah, me too. Unfortunately, I'm about to ask you, Glenn, who it should be. Final thing, in terms of narrative, Danny Welbeck to start or to come on and ruin the title chances for Arsenal. That could be an interesting one.
He's got like a pretty good history against Arsenal, hasn't he? He always seems to like turn up. I remember the period when like he was sort of in and out of United's first team. Anytime he came in against Arsenal, he seemed to score.
Right.
And I just wanted to quickly ask you, who do you think Arsenal want to come up against, Evan Ferguson or Danny Welbeck? Because you've got the young guy, and then you've got the older guy, and both are very, very different.
I think you end up using both, don't you? I think I would start Danny Welbeck just because I love his hold-up play. I think he's such a sort of smart player for the team. I think he's the kind of player that the rest of the team absolutely probably adore because of how technically great he is, and he works so hard for the team as well. Just not always as clinical as you'd like. He's got how many goals? He's got 6 goals this year for next year of 8.9, whereas Ferguson seems to go and get those goals. He's got 4 goals from an XG of 4.8. So I think it might still be one where they might save Ferguson for one of the other games that they've got coming up and go Welbeck, especially against his old side. Prediction time. Nubaid, what are we saying?
Brighton have 5 games in 14 days, and they just played against Everton and lost 5-1. They also have the 4th best away record. But Arsenal have to win. We need the narrative for the title race. So I'll go Arsenal 2-1. 2-1
for content, is that what you're saying? 2-1.
Yeah.
Okay. I think this could be the end. I think Brighton...
How many times have you said that?
True. I think Brighton might do something here. I think it could be I'm going to go 1-1 draw. That kind of just ruins it for Arsenal.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I've got to go Brighton. I really feel as though it could go either way this game. It just depends who settles into the game quicker. Like you mentioned, Odegaard, if he gets on the ball and you start letting him dictate play, it's a problem. Who's going to play right back for Brighton? Who's going to play up front? I personally would like to see Evan up front and Danny coming in off the left and maybe give Mitoma a little bit of a rest. I think it looks really tired at the moment, and I feel as though Danny just gives you that willing runner in behind, and it's probably something that Ben White won't like as much as facing someone one-on-one. But yeah, I'll go with Brighton.
Okay. Guys, let us know. What do you think? What's the score going to be? And who's going to score the winner if you have got a winner?
Thanks so much for watching ESPN on YouTube. And for more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for premium content and live streaming, subscribe to ESPN Plus.